water. This is acting as my lubricant. I have water on my hands. You can see my clay is shiny. So that's what you want. My hands are resting on there. You see how my fingers are rocking and rolling? They're going all over the place. That is telling me that my clay is not centered at all. So we have to center this clay before we do anything else. So what I'm going to do is get a good speed going. I think the fastest my wheel spins is when I'm centering. You can set the speed and forget it. So set that wheel. You can take your foot off of the pedal if you want to. I almost always do. Like I said, I move my toes around all the time. I don't know why. So what I like to do is I take my left hand and I make a C with my left hand like this. And I'm going to rest my arm on my splash pan here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my body's comfortable and I'm going to keep breathing. This part is really easy to hold your breath. You will notice if you're getting tired, it's probably because you're not breathing. So make that C with your left hand, rest your arm on your splash pan, and I'm going to breathe and I'm going to push my left hand in towards the center of my wheel. And I'm using my pinky and my ring finger. I'm using all these fingers now, pushing in, kind of pushing down a little bit with my thumb too. I can feel the clay getting sticky, so I'm losing moisture on the outside of my clay. So I just slowly let go. You can see almost my whole left hand was doing something. My whole left hand was working. My pinky, my thumb, my ring, all of it was putting pressure on that clay. But the clay got sticky. If the clay gets sticky, that means it's really gonna stick, I know, to your hands, and the clay is gonna start telling your hands what it wants to do instead of you telling it what you want it to do. So if it's ever sticky, take that breath, slowly let go, add more water, carry on with your next steps. So I already started centering it. It's already pretty close to being centered just from using my left hand. So let's do it again. Let's make that C with your left hand, push in, and I'm flexing my abs too. I'm using my muscles in my abs and in my back. And I'm staying strong and steady, so I'm pushing in towards the middle. Now what I'm gonna do is take my...
Like the heel of your hand.
I am actually pushing in
The
this
whole,
way.
just the whole hand.
Whole hand.
Okay.
Yep, so in. And then I'm gonna take my right hand. I'm gonna use the side of my right hand, and I'm going to push down. So I'm pushing in and down at the same time. And I'm still pushing in with my pinky and my ring finger, but just more gently. I'm allowing the clay now to get flattened out, so I'm allowing my left hand to move out a little bit, but it's still staying strong. And this is something that will make more and more sense the more you do it too. I always, or a lot of the time, I say, close your eyes, and then you can kind of feel the clay better. So I'm gonna do it once more. In with my left hand, staying nice and strong and steady. Now I'm gonna take my right, and I can brace you can brace your thumbs. I always just like to have at least one other point of contact. I feel like I have better control.
So you don't cone up at all?
Sometimes I do. If I'm using a larger amount of clay, that's when I cone up and down.
Okay.
Yep. If I'm using a smaller amount of clay, that's when I usually just kind of go for it. Yep.
Like as in like anything around a pound and a half, 2 pounds?
Yep.
You don't need to do it?
2 pounds is when I'd probably start to cone up and down. Yeah. Pound and a half is when I usually just go right in and make that hockey puck and call it a day.
So if you're using more clay and you really cone up, do you slightly push it forward?
I do.
Oh.
I'll show you
Yeah.
guys. So let me get it to a point. I can do that. So if I want to cone it up and down, I'm going to take both of my hands, hold them on the side, and I'm going to start squeezing them together like this. And that's going to push the clay up. So I'm squeezing both hands, and now I'm bringing my hands up with that cone. Okay. Now I have this fun little cone. And now, Marla, what you were saying, I always, when I want to push this down, I push away and down. I do that, so I'm pushing away and now down. Still pushing in with my left hand and down with my right. Now I can start to center it again. If I don't go pushing away when I make that cone go down, I'll show you. It'll get kind of like a mushroom top, and I'll trap slip in there. Hey,
I
Rob.
was just gonna say that's what I do.
Yes.
I make a mushroom.
Yes, exactly. So watch what happens if I just push down. See?
Yeah.
See this
Oh,
right
yeah.
here? If I keep pushing down, that is trapping slip inside of the cone now. So say I push down all the way, open up, I'm ready to pull. There's slip in between the walls that will eventually, more than likely, find its way out on the walls while I'm pulling, and I'm not gonna have a fun time anymore. The pot's either gonna get really off-centered, or maybe I'm not gonna notice until it's out of the bisque kiln, or until it's out of the glaze kiln. I don't know. Who knows? But I'm definitely centered now. How's it going, Roth? Good.
You can tell it's centered just by feel.
Just by feel. Yep. So if I rest my hands on there, I can feel that my fingers are staying nice and steady. And then you can also watch, my fingers aren't rocking and rolling all over the place at all. They're staying nice and still. So now, what you want to do is slow your wheel. And now I have to make an opening in this hockey puck. What I like to do is I put my right hand out in front of myself and left hand will go on top. And I use the tip of my middle finger on my right hand, and I find the middle of this clay, and I slowly start to push down. I actually push more with my left hand than my right hand. My right hand is very weak. It's not the strongest hand in the world. So my muscle from my left hand definitely comes in handy, no pun intended. So I push down. And now, I have my needle tool, and you want to check the thickness of your base of your pot. You don't have to, but I think in the beginning it's really important just to get a feel for figuring out when to stop pushing down so you don't always have to check the thickness of your piece. So what I will do is I take my needle tool and I push it right down in the middle of my donut now. And I'll lift it up with my finger touching the floor of my little donut here. So you can see my thickness is like a little thicker than 1/4 of an inch. Let's say like 1/2 inch possibly,
Yeah.
from the tip all the way to the end of the needle. And that's a healthy thickness. If I am focusing on, if I know that I'm not going to be trimming my piece, trimming the bottom of my pot, then I think that's a healthy bottom. I could go a little thinner than that probably. If I want it to be, or if I wanted to trim the bottom of my pot, I would want that to be a little thicker. Probably closer to a healthy 1/2 inch, or maybe even 3/4 of an inch. So say I did want it thicker. I can take clay from the outside right here, and I am going to just start pushing that clay in. We're the boss of the clay. If we stay steady and tell that clay what to do, it will listen to us.
Really? I hope so.
It does, I
Listen
promise.
to me a lot.
It's gonna.
I'll channel your energy. It's gonna be great.
So,
Listen.
I'm the boss. So I
That
added.
makes me bring Samantha over here.
I have on my sleeves. I'm not afraid.
She is the boss.
I love that. Not always. Sometimes I forget. and My pots fall over too.
I know, see, I know you, I see a lot
Open
of-
up my base a little bit more. So I'm really just focusing on making a cylinder right now. So you can use your sponge. I'm going to use my fingers just so you can see better. But my middle finger is in that opening, and now I am pushing down and opening up that base. I'm not pushing down too hard. If I do, like that, that's when I'll have a funny little indent. If you don't want that, don't push down as hard. Stay nice and level.
And having it so different.
True. That's a good point. If you don't want it and it does happen, we can scooch some clay. So I could take some of this thicker clay and I can shift it over to the side nice and steady. And we can compress the base a little bit. Compressing is very important, especially if you are making plates or things that have really, really wide bases. Compress, compress, compress. If you don't compress the base of your pot, you will almost always get what's called S-cracking. And S-cracks show up usually after a bisque firing. And it's literally a crack in the shape of an S. And it's so sad because you almost always know why it happened. And it's because we didn't compress enough. So compressing pushes, and I like putting a spiral, so I'm gonna push down and bring my finger out to the side. And now I am going to do some pulls. I like to pull with a sponge in my hand, mainly because it's habit for me. When I was throwing in production, we would always have a sponge in our hand. It's constantly adding water to the outside of your pot, so you can be very efficient with your pulling while you have that sponge in your hand. I like to do my demos without a sponge in my hand so you can really see what my fingers are doing. I do recommend, if you have longer nails, to use a sponge. If you're noticing that your nails are kind of digging into your clay or something like that.
I bite mine.
Me too.
I bite, so
My
I'm good.
boyfriend yells at me. I need to stop. So, if you have little nubs like me, you're probably okay without using a sponge. But if you're noticing your clay is drying out a lot, keep a sponge in your hand. See what happens. So, make sure you're comfortable. My wheel is not spinning too fast. It's a nice medium speed. It's not overwhelming or anything like that. And remember, you're the boss. So we have complete control. If I am at a point where I'm like, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, just stop the pedal. Just stop the wheel. Walk away if you want to. Look at the 500 series book that I brought in of cups and drink some water and come back and it's gonna be great. But if you're not feeling overwhelmed and you want to keep on keeping on, have that wheel spinning at a nice medium speed and make sure you're comfortable. And I like to work at, if I'm thinking of the wheel as a clock, I work at around 3:30, 4 o'clock-ish. So 12, 3, 6, and 9. Try your best to keep your hands at around, 4:30-ish, we'll say. You'll notice, especially in the beginning, the clay is going to want to bring your hands around the wheel. But remember, try your best to keep your hands right at 4:30. It's okay to keep them between like 3 and 6, but it's a good time to stay at. So I have enough water, it doesn't feel sticky. So my left hand's on the inside, my right hand is on the outside, bracing my hands too, so I have better control. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to push in with my fingertips, my middle finger on my right hand. I pushed in just a little bit, and that made a donut right here. All of this clay is now telling my hands that it's ready to be brought right up to the ceiling. When I did that, I lost some slip. I lost some moisture on the outside. So when I pushed in, I just picked up the slip. So I just slowly let go. I'm gonna add a teeny bit more water just so that I have more lubricant on the outside. And now I am going to keep my right hand, so my ring finger and my middle finger are gonna hang out under that donut. My left hand is staying nice and strong and steady right on the inside. I can feel the bottom of my pot on my fingertips of my left hand. And now I'm going to lift straight up to the ceiling. I'm lifting that donut. And I can feel the clay getting sticky. My fingers are at the rim. I softened up on my pressure. I'm barely touching the clay now. And you can just take a breath and slowly let go. And it was a very, very small pull, but we moved some clay. So let's take some water out of here. Let's do another pull. So I brought some slip to the rim of my pot too. I can just take my sponge and compress the rim a little bit, and it cleans up some of that slip. Let's add more water and do it again. So I'm pushing in with my middle finger, and I'm gonna add more water because it got sticky. So I pushed in with my middle finger, and now I'm lifting that clay up, straight up to the ceiling. And I'm breathing, and I'm at the rim. I'm gonna take that breath and slowly let go. And you can always scrape your hands in your bucket. But I do want to show you what happens when we don't slowly let go, because we're excited and want to see what's going on. Which is a normal thing. And grabbing that clay, lifting it up. And at the rim, I'm gonna slowly let go. So now you can clean the inside. It's really important to take the water out from the inside of your, our simple tools out. So I have my rib tool, and what I want to do right now is I want to clean up some of the slip that's on the outside, so all that wet clay. I want this piece to be easier for me to pick up. So I want to take that slip off, so I'm going to use my rib tool, and I'm going to push it in from the bottom. I'm going to clean up that skirt that was down there, so it picked up some clay. Just put it in your bucket. And then I can hold my rib tool up against the side, and I can push against my rib. And that cleans up some of the slip as well. You can use your wooden stick now. You can use the point on your stick. And I always like to create a little bit of a bevel under my pot for my wire tool to fit into. So I like to create just a little bit of an indent, and I'll clean up those goobers. So I call these goobers or boogers, just depending on my mood. So that's a normal thing. I will push under here, and clay has nowhere else to go but up. So now I can hold my tool at a different angle, and I can take that clay off of there. Yep. So this is the part where I learned it is so okay to do this like 1,500 times if you wanted to. There is no set rule for how many times you're allowed to go back and forth cleaning up your pot. I could spend all day doing this if I wanted to. So I can scooch under again, make a nice clean bevel, and then there's some goobers, so I'm gonna clean it. And you can just keep going, but also remember it's okay if you're planning on trimming. It's okay to have those goobers there, because you can always trim them off next week. So now I'm ready to take this pot off of the wheel. My hands are dry-ish. Obviously we're throwing, so our hands will have some clay on them, some water, whatever. But I don't have all wet slip and clay all over them. So my hands are dry-ish. I have my wire tool. My wheel is stopped, and my pot is nice and clean on the outside. I don't have any wet slip or anything crazy like that. I'm gonna take my wire tool. I'm gonna hold it nice and strong. You can wrap it around your fingers if you want to. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slice under my piece. I'm gonna place my wire tool down, and then I'm going to immediately pick up my pot. If I take too long to lift up my pot from the wheel, it's gonna re-stick itself to the wheel, which is fine. You can just take your wire tool again and rewire it and pick it up again. Oh yeah, so it's okay. But I like to say that before I do it because I think people get nervous, thinking that they're taking too long or something like that, and you'll be okay. It's all good. No worries. So, wire tool at the top of my wheel. Slice towards myself, place it down, make sure my hands are clean. My hands are now right at the bottom of my pot, and I'm squeezing down at the base and lifting away. Place it right on your board. Grab another ball of clay, make